Okay, here we go with a video on perfect price discrimination. So what is perfect price discrimination? It's as if the business can read your mind and they're going to charge you exactly what you're willing to pay. So of course businesses can't read your mind, but this is the scenario where everybody pays a different price. And the price you pay is the maximum that you're willing to pay. So let me recap. If you can perfectly price discriminate, you're the business, then you have an unlimited number of different prices. It's like you read their mind at the front door and you say, okay, I can read your mind. I know what you're willing to pay, what the most you're willing to pay, and that's the price for you. So that's perfect price discrimination. Let's see. So here's the definition. Perfect price discrimination, also known as first degree price discrimination. A firm sells each unit at the maximum amount any customer is willing to pay for it. So, of course, the prices then differ across customers. Some customers are going to pay more. Well, of course, some will pay less. So, an example of perfect price discrimination. Has any company ever said, hey, what are you willing to pay for this item? You ever bought anything online? You ever been to eBay? Okay, so a company, eBay, is one of those who pops the question, not that question, pops the question, hey, what's the most you're willing to pay for this bid? Place your max bid. Tell us, what's the most you're willing to pay? That's an example of perfect price discrimination. So our friends at eBay are one example of having perfect price discrimination, asking you what's the most you're willing to pay. So perfect price discrimination, if the firm, which of course has market power, knows exactly what each customer is willing to pay for each unit of the good, and it can prevent those who value the good less from reselling to those who value it more, the firm then charges each person his or her reservation price. So what's the reservation price? It's the most you're willing to pay in order to obtain one unit of that output. So that's perfect price discrimination. And well, what's the deal about this? Is this good? Is it bad? Well, it's actually not good for consumers. It hurts consumers. It takes away, before when consumers were making a purchase, they were typically capturing some consumer surplus. Well, all of that is gone. It all goes now to the producer. So this is the best of both worlds for the producer. It gets previously the consumer surplus, plus it retains their previous producer surplus when you compare to having a single price. So the perfect price discrimination, equilibrium, it's efficient and it's going to maximize total welfare. It does so because it maximizes producer surplus. Perfect price discrimination equilibrium, it will differ from the competitive equilibrium in two key ways. First, in the perfect price discrimination equilibrium, there's the only one that's sold at that lowest price is that last unit. Whereas if you have a competitive equilibrium, everybody pays the same price and everybody pays that price that's equal to marginal cost. And that's not the case here. It's only the case for that very last unit sold. So the perfectly price discriminating monopoly is going to capture all the welfare that before was going to consumers and some was going to producer. Now it's all going to the producer. And before, remember, there was a deadweight loss. If you had, not in competition, they don't have deadweight losses, but in a single price monopoly, there's a deadweight loss. Well, that's gone too. And the next slide will illustrate this. So here's the scenario. You've got an MC curve, the upward sloping, no surprise there. You got a downward sloping demand curve, no surprise there. This MR curve only applies for the single price monopolist. When you have a perfectly price discriminating monopolist, the demand and MR are the same curve because everybody gets a different price. So for example, in your store, you have somebody who really values the item, the high value buyer way up here, that's the price they pay. And maybe somebody with also another high valuation is willing to pay here, that's the price they pay. And somebody else is willing to pay here, that's the price they pay. And what about the consumer who values it right here? That's the price they pay. What about the guy who values it not so high right here? They don't get the good. So those who get the goods, and how much goods are produced? Well, the goods that are produced is where demand equals the supply, MC. So we're going to make all the way out here this quantity. That's the quantity that's produced. What's the price? Well, only that last unit, that QD unit, gets that price equal to MC, that price. Everybody else pays a higher price. So all of these dots on this blue line are different prices that the perfectly price discriminating monopolist charges. So then our revenue are going to be all these prices times all this quantity. So this entire white and green area is revenue underneath the blue demand curve. So that's our revenue. And then you need to subtract off the marginal cost. So all this area here in the white is marginal cost. That's all your variable cost of production. So where is the producer surplus in this case? Well, it's area A, it's area B, it's area D, it's area C, it's area E. All of these are producer surpluses. What about consumer surplus? Well, remember the consumer surplus definition. The difference between the price, yes, and your willingness to pay. So your willingness to pay is shown on the demand curve. Well, price and demand are the exact same curve, so there is no consumer surplus. So consumer surplus is 0, 0. Producer surplus are all these letters A through E. And so total surplus just adds those up. So total surplus is A through E. Deadweight loss? There is none. 0. So that's the case of perfectly price discriminating monopolist, where they're going to produce and what prices, what range of prices they're going to charge.